The professor held a brooch in her hand and gently inserted it into the girl's fingertip. This way, the girl could control her magic. But unlike the first time, this one had her finger pierced by the brooch. Although the final result was the same, the students of the School of Evil suffered extreme pain. As to obtain evil power, they had to endure a pain that the students of the School of Good could not bear. This is a school where students are trained to become heroes or villains to maintain the world's balance. The movie begins by showing Agatha, a girl who lived in a cabin next to a cemetery. Since her mother was known for being a witch, Agatha faced constant prejudice in this small town, even when walking through the streets. She could feel the villagers' looks of disgust, but despite all the difficulties life threw at her, she chose to face the world with a smile. One day, Agatha found a small homeless lamb. She had barely approached it when a man blocked the alley. He informed Agatha that the town did not tolerate outsiders. While Agatha was panicking, a girl appeared just in time to save her. Her name was Sophie. Despite her apparent beauty and elegance, she suffered daily abuse from her stepmother. Since she was little, she had one wish: to go to the School of Good and become a princess. Every day, she sent applications to the magic school, hoping to be taken far away from there. That night, Sophie went to the woods as usual, waiting for a messenger to take her away. But Agatha followed her and made her face reality. One could not live every day in a fairy tale. Then, a blood-red sky enveloped the forest, and before they could react, Sophie was captured by a black mist. While she celebrated, Agatha followed her friend. Soon, the black mist abandoned her halfway. Before Sophie could complain, a large bird picked up both girls and took them out of the forest. After crossing the red sky, they finally arrived at the legendary School of Good and Evil. However, what intrigued Sophie was that the bird dropped Agatha in the School of Good, which meant she was about to enter the School of Evil. Next, she was thrown into a sewer, unable to accept the reality. Sophie sought out the professors to express her situation, as she believed that beauty was a sign of goodness. How could she be so beautiful and still be assigned to the School of Evil? However, her request was rejected by Professor Lady Lesso. Meanwhile, Agatha also felt that the school had made a mistake in their assignments, as the environment she grew up in made her believe she did not have a good character. Despite the fervent appeals of Professor Dovey, Agatha did not change her mind. At night, the two met secretly and decided to seek out the headmaster to clarify the situation. However, as soon as they entered, they saw a quill writing automatically. Apparently, each person who arrived at the school made the quill write a story according to their circumstances. This is how all fairy tale stories began. After the headmaster learned about their situation, he asked a question: what could evil never have but was indispensable for good? Sophie answered by saying it was good manners or an incredible castle, but that was not it. Then Agatha said it was true love. The headmaster explained that only the kiss of true love could change Sophie's fate. The next morning, Agatha decided to help Sophie choose a target. Sophie ended up falling in love with the prince of the School of Good. Though hesitant, Agatha agreed to help her express her feelings for the sake of her friend. However, before she could act, an incident occurred. Sophie, who always wanted to switch to good, naturally stirred dissatisfaction among the students of evil. During a class where talents were stimulated, Hester took the opportunity to summon an evil dragon to punish Sophie. However, to everyone's surprise, when she was in danger, a swarm of wasps entered through the window and attacked the dragon. The girl who attacked Sophie fell to the ground, and the wasps stopped their attack when she screamed for them to cease. But in the next moment, the wasps that were in everyone's sight transformed into a human figure. Seeing that person, Lady Lesso was astonished, as the man was the headmaster's brother and the founder of the School of Evil. Thousands of years ago, after a battle between the School of Good and Evil, he mysteriously disappeared. Since then, the School of Evil had never again defeated the School of Good. At the same time, Agatha, who was taking a class at the School of Good, discovered some secrets. This was an exclusive class on the essence of magic, where the professor asked the students to put their finger in the water and make a wish. While others wished to see their family and friends, Agatha wished for everyone to return home, specifically Sophie. Suddenly, the fish in the water began to stir and slowly transformed into a person. It turns out that every student who arrived at the school had specific tests to pass, and if they failed 3 times, they mysteriously disappeared. The girl in front of her had failed 100 years ago, but Agatha's wish saved her. At that moment, the large bird flew to them. Everyone fled in fright except Agatha, who realized that the bird's gestures were very similar to those of a student who had recently disappeared. While Agatha was preparing to confirm her suspicion, Prince Tedros, possessed of a sense of justice, killed the bird. He thought he was being the hero of the situation, but Agatha punched him. With the chaotic situation, Dovey quickly dispersed the crowd, but this changed Agatha's perception of the School of Good. She said there was nothing good about ending the life of someone kind just because they failed to meet expectations. The professor was trying to justify herself because, until then, Agatha was the student most like a fairy tale princess she had ever seen. Dovey wanted Agatha to stay, but at that moment, she couldn't listen. As soon as the class ended, she went to the dining hall to tell Sophie some unrevealed secrets about the place. However, before she could finish speaking, Sophie was taken by a guard and locked in the confinement room of the School of Evil. No one knew what she experienced in there. When Sophie came out of the confinement room, she had completely changed. She stopped hiding behind a facade and began to face her true feelings. Finally, in the face of Sophie's relentless pursuit, Tedros could not resist her. Due to the battle between the schools of good and evil, none of the students recognized the value of the other side. The students of the School of Good did not want the prince to be corrupted, while those of the School of Evil did not want the good to save the prince. Eventually, the conflict escalated so much that it caught the attention of the school administration. To ensure fairness, the headmaster decided to subject Sophie and the prince to a test. Both were to enter the dark forest from opposite directions, and if they managed to find each other and survive until dawn, they would prove that their love was true. However, Sophie had never entered the dark forest and had no idea how dangerous it could be at night. She thought the beautiful areas would be safe, but ended up being violently attacked by carnivorous plants. Fortunately, she managed to escape but attracted the attention of a pumpkin doll. Agatha heard Sophie's screams in the forest, and worried, she broke the rules by transforming into a small bird and flying into the forest. After helping Sophie escape danger, the two heard Tedros's voice. Agatha quickly hid and let Sophie meet the prince. At that moment, the prince was fighting the pumpkin doll, but he was no match for the furious doll. Since Sophie was not truly in love, her goal from the beginning was not true love. It was all to get the kiss, and thus change her fate. However, this attitude, imperceptibly, increased the power of the doll. Tedros asked Sophie to throw the sword to him, but Sophie was paralyzed with fear at the scene. Seeing that the prince was about to die, Agatha quickly picked up the sword and ran to him. The prince seized the opportunity and killed the pumpkin doll. After this test, the prince saw Sophie's true nature. Then he took the magic handkerchief and gave up the test. Unexpectedly, Sophie did not reflect on her actions, but placed all the blame on Agatha. Agatha said they were best friends, but Sophie said a princess could not be friends with a witch. Then she also used the handkerchief. To her surprise, it was precisely this malice and selfishness that fully awakened Rafal, the brother of Headmaster Rian. In the end, under Rafal's temptation, Sophie completely succumbed to the dark side, even learning dark magic under his guidance. Once mastered, this magic not only granted enormous dark power, but could also change the person in a short time. The professors of the School of Good and Evil received the news and ran to the library, but it was already too late. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the annual Eternity Ball, an exclusive event of the School of Good. Everyone was happily singing and dancing. It was then that Sophie suddenly entered. Her appearance had drastically changed. She wanted Tedros to go out with her again, but the prince had already lost interest. However, this was exactly what Sophie expected. The students tried to protect the prince, but they were easily defeated by Sophie's blood magic. Agatha tried to convince Sophie not to let herself be consumed by evil, but she said they were sworn enemies, and that the story would only end when one of them died. Then she turned and left. At that moment, a young man ran in with a serious expression, telling them to follow him. When everyone arrived in the hall, they discovered that all the professors in the school had been turned into statues, which enraged everyone present. They grabbed their weapons, ready to attack the villains of the School of Evil. Agatha tried to intervene and convince them, but no one listened to her. From the beginning, the School of Evil attacked, and the School of Good defended. If the School of Good attacked first, no one knew what could happen. Agatha knew that all this was part of Sophie's plans. She transformed into a dove and flew to the School of Evil, where she saw the students dancing. Sophie had organized the first ball of the School of Evil. Sophie was unrecognizable, aged. When the students of the School of Good invaded, the battle between the two sides began. The students of Good drew their weapons with the intention of killing the witch. At the moment the School of Good initiated the attack, they had already lost because once goodness attacked, it turned into evil, and once evil turned into goodness, it gained more strength. All this was part of Sophie's plan. She tried to transform the School of Evil evil into a school of good to regain her former innocence, but did not realize she had already been corrupted by evil. Observing the chaos, Sophie felt great satisfaction. Then she transformed into a shadow and flew to the headmaster's office, prepared to forcibly rewrite her story. However, she could never have imagined that the true villain behind everything was Rafal. In fact, in that ancient battle between good and evil, Rafal had not disappeared. He killed his brother and impersonated him for years. Little by little, he inserted evil thoughts into the school of good, making the force of goodness less pure while increasing his own power. He tried to control both forces, but to achieve this goal, he needed the kiss of true love. Sophie, without thinking, offered her kiss. Then, at the next moment, the school began to collapse. Everyone was about to die. Rafal had deceived Sophie. He always wanted to create a world full of evil. Sophie realized her mistake, but it was too late. At that moment, Agatha arrived just in time. She still wanted to save her friend from suffering, but Rafal was determined not to let Agatha ruin his plans. He wielded his magic pen to eliminate any resistance. However, Sophie threw herself in front of Agatha, taking the fatal blow. With Sophie's sacrifice, the power of the true love kiss disappeared, and the school's castle began to restore itself. Everyone who had died came back to life. At that moment, Tedros tried to sneak in to attack but was severely injured. Fortunately, Agatha took advantage of the distraction to grab the magic sword and kill Rafal with a slash. When everything calmed down, she hugged Sophie's body and cried intensely, but when her tears fell on Sophie's wound, a miracle happened, and she came back to life. In this way, their story was successfully rewritten, and the two schools completely merged. In the end, Agatha and Sophie decided to return to the small town where they lived. After this event, their friendship became unbreakable. However, one day an arrow pierced the barrier between the two worlds. Clearly, their story was not over. In fact, it seemed that everything was just beginning, and so the movie ends.